Hi, welcome back to this Wednesday edition of Focal Point AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. We'll open up the phone lines here in just a few moments. Got some sound bites to get to that we had in the queue since yesterday. Wasn't able to get to them yesterday. And here is a piece that will be of interest to you. Science confirms what we all knew. Dogs are superior to cats. Now, I make sure that our cat, Emma, knows this because when I comb her and brush her, I've told you this before, I remind her that her IQ is smaller than my hat size. And every day before I leave, I instruct her to do her chores and to do her homework. I come home and she hasn't done either one of them all day. She just lays around and eats and sleeps all day. Now, here is a article. I'm looking at Right Wing News. Some of the best-known research run by Erica Friedman at the University of Maryland and outside colleagues investigated the possible relationship between dog ownership and cardiovascular functioning. After carefully following the recovery rates of patients who had suffered a heart attack, Friedman discovered that those who were dog owners, compared to those who were without a canine pal, were almost 9 times more likely to be alive 12 months later. And dog owners coped well with everyday stress, were relaxed about life, had high self-esteem, and were less likely to be diagnosed with depression. I've got a story in here of some online high school course in Florida says the reason that Muslims go jihadi on us is that they have low self-esteem. Well, apparently what they need is a dog, but dogs are unclean in Islam, so they are doomed to low self-esteem, and that's why they go off and murder helpless, innocent infidels. But anyway, dog owners had higher self-esteem and were less likely to be diagnosed with depression. Interestingly, this is scientific now. This is not my opinion. This is researchers at the University of Maryland. The same cannot be said for cats. Some studies show that living with a cat may help alleviate negative moods, but is unlikely to make you feel especially good. And others suggest that cat owners may actually be more likely than others to die in the 12 months following a heart attack. So you have a heart attack, you want to live, get a dog. You want to die, get a cat. That's the bottom line here. And, of course, dogs are loyal companions who are thrilled out of their minds every time you come home, while cats are generally indifferent to your existence, but willing to tolerate you as long as you are giving them food and they're allowed to use you as a scratching post. Now, back to more serious items. Here's a piece from the Washington Post, and this is really sobering to me because this kind of touches the heart of American culture. We believe, that's why we're called the American Family Association, is that we believe marriage and family are at the heart of any successful, prosperous, stable, healthy, and happy society and culture. You cannot have it. You can't have it. You can't have a strong, stable, prosperous, healthy, happy society without strong, stable marriages and families. It's essential. You can't have it. You can't have the culture you envision without having marriages that last, where children are raised in intact biological families. You want a happy culture. You want a prosperous culture. You want a stable culture. You want a vibrant culture. It's got to start right there. It's the cornerstone. Far more important than anything else. Far more important than education or politics or any other system that you can name, business or whatever. You got to have strong, stable marriages and families. And so the Washington Post now is reporting the results of the Pew Research Center that indicates that now nearly 4 out of 10 families with children under the age of 18 are headed by women who are either the sole or primary breadwinners for their families. Now, I am going to say something here, and I don't care that it's politically incorrect. And I know if Right Wing Watch picks up on this or anybody else, they're just going to lacerate me for this. I don't care. From a biblical standpoint, it's very clear that men are designed to be the breadwinners for their families. That's the way God set it up. That's the way he designed it. Husbands are to use their stamina and their strength and their brain power. Not that they're smarter than women. I'm not saying that. But God's given them a brain, and the purpose for using their mental ability is to provide for their families, to use their physical strength to work hard, to work long hours, to use their physical strength to protect their wives and protect their children and be providers for them. That is the biblical pattern. And the biblical pattern is for a wife and a mother to focus her energies, devote her energies on making a home for her children and for her husband. You can see that in Genesis chapter 3, where when the curse comes, well, it's not the curse on man and woman, it's the curse on the ground, curse on the serpent, but Adam and Eve are not cursed. The ground is cursed in Adam's case. And what God says to Eve, look, this is where the fall is going to affect you. There'll be increased pain. Your pain in childbirth will be multiplied. And your husband, your desire will be for your husband, but he will rule over you. So in other words, he says for a woman, here's where you're going to feel primarily the effects of the fall. It's going to be felt in your relationship with your husband. You will have certain desires for him. He will not be able to satisfy those desires. In fact, you will find that there will be times, rather than your husband being a sensitive and caring companion and leader, he's going to be kind of rough and hard with you. He's going to rule over you rather than lead you. So that's one of the places you're going to experience the consequences of the fall is in your marriage, and you will experience it in the process of giving birth and raising children. In pain, you will bring forth children. Your pain will be multiplied in childbearing. And I think that's not just a reference to the child birthing process, but the pain and agony and heartache that every mother knows out of her burden, her concern, her anxiety for her children. And the older they get, the more damage they can do, the more worried a mom gets. So that's where the woman experiences the impact of the fall. Where? In her home, in her marriage, and in her home, in her family. Now, where does the man experience the effect of the fall? It says, by the sweat of your brow you will eat. The ground is cursed because of you. It will produce thorns and thistles. So you're going to have to fight those puppies all of your working life. Now, there's a promise there. You will eat. In other words, you will be able to provide for yourself and your family by working hard out in the garden, out in the farms, out in the fields. You'll be able to provide for your families, but it's going to be sweat. It's going to be exhausting. It's going to be tiring. There are going to be thorns and thistles you're going to have to fight. So the idea before the fall is man was working in the garden. Work is not a consequence of the fall. A lot of Christians misunderstand that. Work is not a consequence of the fall. Remember, before the fall happened, God set Adam in the garden to do what? To work it. So work was not a consequence of the fall. That was part of God's design. We are designed for work. That's one of the reasons why you're seeing the skyrocketing suicide rate in older men that can't find jobs. They're at the tail end of their working life. There's so much of our esteem is tied up in our work, and that's proper. That's appropriate. Nothing wrong with that. That's the way God made us. We're not really going to be fulfilled unless we are working. Now, you retire, you've put your time in, and you've earned the right to rest. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about guys that are still in their working years, can work, need to work, and want to work, and they can't find jobs. And you were seeing a suicide rate that's going right off the charts. In a lot of those cases, you have broken marriages. Guys that are solo because they've been divorced. It's not good for the man to be alone. The combination of the economic pressure, lack of a job, the absence of a helpmate and a companion, which is what God designed a woman to be to a man, that takes a lethal toll. So anyway, the point I'm making here, if you got households where 40% of them are headed by a woman who is the primary breadwinner, then everything is upside down in our culture. And the ones that are going to suffer from this are going to be the children. And we've seen this spike in single-parent households. This is, again, from the Washington Post, information coming from the Pew Research Center. It says this, and there's another problem, is the number of married mothers who out-earn their husbands. That number has quadrupled. And again, I'm going to be politically incorrect here. I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think it's a healthy dynamic to have a wife out-earn her husband because so much of his sense of worth as a male is tied up in what he does vocationally and providing for his family. That's his calling. It's not his wife's job to provide for his family. He knows that it's his job. And if he has a wife that out-earns him, I think that's going to put some stress on his psyche. It's going to put some stress on that marriage, and it can complicate things. You know, if the woman gets pregnant and she wants to stay home with kids, which a lot of working moms do, they don't even know how much they want to be home with their kids until they get pregnant with that first child and give birth to that first child. And all of a sudden that nesting instinct kicks in, and where they want to be is home with that baby, making a home for her and for her family. And she may not be able to do it. She may be trapped or feel trapped at any rate. She's got to go to work. She's got to produce the income because the family is dependent not upon the husband and the father, but dependent upon her. And I'll be honest with you, I think that's an unhealthy dynamic there, as politically incorrect as that may sound. And I frankly don't care if I get beat up for saying that and by whom. Now, here's what the Pew says, Pew Research Center: the number of married mothers who out-earned their husbands has nearly quadrupled from 4% in 1960 to 15% in 2011. Single mothers, who are the sole providers for their families, have tripled in number from 7% in 1960 to 25% in the same period. Now, Americans understand some of these problems. By the way, the number to call if you want to weigh in on what we've talked about so far today, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Want to talk about the things we've talked about today, sanctity of life, this lieutenant governor candidate in Virginia. I think it's critically important if we can see if a true, genuine, unapologetic social conservative can win a statewide election. We got that going to be tested in Virginia. And then what we've been talking about here about God's design for men to be the breadwinners in the home and the stress it puts on a marriage and a family when he is not. I'll talk when we get back about how Americans feel about all this. Might surprise you. Focal Point AFR Talk. We'll be right back. Stay with us.